So this is the third class on the concept of wearing a kippah or yarmulke when you enter a synagogue. So we already came to the conclusion, but it's interesting to see the process. We're learning the writing of Rabbi Yosef Messas and the process and the way he discusses the issue. Just an interesting comment, people say in Hebrew you call the hair cover kippah. The Yiddish-speaking Jews, Ashkenazim, call it yarmulke. And it says a very Yiddish word, but it's actually, according to what I read, came from Turkish. It's a Turkish word. Maybe not of modern Turkish, maybe in the 1500s, but it has the sound of it. So, but after it got into the Hebrew language, so they gave it interpretation. They broke it into two words. Says it's Yareh Malka, reverence of the king, but it's obviously not a Hebrew word. So Rabbi Yosef Messas discusses this issue because many people did not just to cover the hair, to wear kippah on a regular basis, while meanwhile other people would label them as religious or not religious based on hair covering. So he quotes this book called Otzar Yisrael, שהביא חבל נביאים שהתנבאו בסגנון אחד, שאין בזה שום איסור, רק מידת חסידות. The author of this book, Otzar Yisrael, cited many different opinions that said that covering one's head when entering the synagogue or in general is just an additional measure of piety, but it is not required by law, it's not required by halakha. Then he adds this, במדרש רבה פרשת מצורע, he quotes a pasuk from the Midrash, במצלתיים יימח המקרא, בעצלתיים יימח המקרא. But laziness causes a certain result that we'll explain. The word mikare. So the word mikare in Hebrew sounds like kar, like cold.
To happen.
Right. Refrigerator is mikarer, so this is mikarer. It sounds like that. The original intention of the pasuk is for like the word tikra. It has nothing to do with cold. It has to do with the ceiling, which is called in Hebrew tikra, above you. And it's a very simple statement. It's not religious or anything like that. It's just good advice. It says if one is lazy, then eventually his whole house is going to collapse. Right? Because you see a little crack, you say, oh, it's okay, nothing will happen. Then you see, a crack, the crack grows, humidity comes from here, it's okay. And the book of Mishlei, this is from Proverbs, speaks a lot about, he denounces laziness, he doesn't like it. And he goes to the extreme, he says, Taman ya'atzel et yado b'tzalahat nil'ama shiva el piv. It says, some people are so lazy that they put their hand on the plate and they don't have the energy to bring it back to their mouth. So from that we have a term in Hebrew, taman yado b'tzalahat. When you say that someone decided to remain indifferent or inactive, you say he put his hand in the plate and left it there. It's like not even willing to eat. So this is the original context of the pasuk. But the Midrash says, "Al yedei she'adam mit'atzel lechasot et rosho, harei hu na'asa deumatikum." So the Midrash says that if one is lazy and does not cover his head, he will become deumatikum. So like it's a Greek word. So the author who quoted this Midrash did not understand the word in Greek, and said we have to correct it to a different word, and he says tzarich lomar dominicum. Klomar echad mikdoshehem komer. It says it means that he becomes a Dominican, a priest that goes. They had the hoods, but they usually do not cover their head. And v'hainu mishum v'chukotem lo telech u'ad kan leshono. So this is the author of this book says that the meaning of the midrash of this statement is that if you don't cover your hair because you're lazy, you'll end up being a Dominican. You're going to be like the priests because you're imitating the customs of the non-Jews. And Rabbi Messas, remember I mentioned several times that Rabbi Messas is very emphatic on the importance of not only halachic legal knowledge, but also linguistic, historical knowledge, comparative religion. You have to bring everything to the table. You can't just focus on halakha. And he says, "Mi hevi'au ad alom beli shum hechreach lagia dominikum mikom deumatikum." Like, how do you make this far-reaching change from in the text from deumatikum to dominicum? כדי להוליד חומרות חדשות ככל העולה על רוחו. Says, and based on that, you create a new legal statement, a new halachic statement that you must cover your head, right? It says when you look at all the printed and written edition, this is the text. It says all you have to correct is one letter, not the whole thing. And in Hebrew, to change from Daled to Resh, it's only the tiny little part at the top of the letter. When you take it off, it will become so. Originally, the word was rheumaticos, which means, it's rheumatism. And what the rheumatism. So the Midrash says, the very simple thing: you don't cover your hair, you're going to catch a cold. That's the only warning. And originally, it seems why would the rabbis even have to say that, right? So there's another story, separate story. In the Talmud says, "Akol bidei shamayim, chutz mirat shamayim." All is in God's hands, except for the reverence of God, which we understand God does not control our faith, but everything else is in God's hands. And a lot of people, when you talk to them about being more cautious, like drive carefully, he says, "Don't worry, it's all from God. If I need to die, I'll die, and if this is not my day, I'll be okay, right?" Yeah, but then you tell them, take a sweater, take care of your health. Oh, don't worry, it's all in God's health, right? Even when you talk about climate change, and in the modern environment, they say, "Oh, it's a conspiracy." In any way, if the world is polluted, we cannot do anything about that. We cannot save the forests because this is something greater than us. God will take care of that. What they forget is that the midrash like that, and another statement in the Talmud, "Hakol bidei shamayim, chutz mitzinim pahim." All is in God's hands, except for one's health. If you catch a cold, don't blame God. Blame yourself for not dressing properly. So it's an important statement. So this is what Rabbi Messas says. Don't distort the text of the midrash to support a legal statement that you want to make, that one has to cover his head, because it's not written there. And the original text is, if you're lazy and you don't cover your hair, you are going to catch a cold. Nothing about becoming a priest or learning non-Jewish practices. And he also wrote there, he quotes another book, "Im basar gadol lebet hakneset החובה על היהודי להתנצל לפניו, שאינו יכול להסיר הכובע מעל ראשו מפני קדושת בית הכנסת." That if a dignitary, a non-Jewish dignitary, came to visit the synagogue, the Jews must tell him that he's not allowed to take off his hat, because among them, this is in other culture, this is a sign of respect, taking off your hat. So you must go and tell him, don't do that. And again, Rabbi Messas says, let's look at thoroughly at that issue. And he says, if you look at the book that was quoted here, it says this: שר גדול שבא לבית הכנסת, אף על פי שמעיקר הדין יכול להסיר הכובע מעל ראשו, דאין איסור כל כך קיים מידת חסידות, אם יכול להתנצל לפניו, אולי יתפייס זכור לטוב. Says, if a dignitary, if an important person visits the synagogue, there's no prohibition for us to see him with his head uncovered, because even for us, it's not a prohibition, it's just a practice of piety. But if the rabbi or one of the leaders can talk to him nicely and say, if you want to consider it, he is praised for that. But it's not an obligation. So again, we see that it's important, even when you look at sources. He quotes a book of halakha or legal issues, and that author misquoted another author, and as a result, we have this confusion. So he says again, the book that was quoted, Shavut Yaakov, says is not that we're obligated to tell the visitor to cover his head, but that it's recommended, and to do it gently and pleasantly. And then Rabbi Messas adds this. He says, I have seen many cases of non-Jewish visitors in the synagogue who came in and and took off their hats, and I didn't tell them anything. And others did not, and others came up to me, him as the rabbi, and asked him, should we tell them, should we admonish them, you have to cover your head. and he said, no, leave them alone, because for them this is showing respect to the holy place. And it did happen that one of them did not listen to Rabbi Meshash and went and sort of commented to that person, cover your head. And he said, Haim lo tahpotz bichvod bet Elohim? What, you don't want me to respect the house of God? So it's important, very important, because what Rabbi Meshash shows us is the sensitivity to how other people think. And we rush, and I think it doesn't apply only to non-Jews, it applies to Jews as well. When someone enters the synagogue, and everybody rushes to show them what to do and how to do, and sometimes they do it in an offensive manner. You have to be very considerate. So he goes on to talk about that. Then one more thing, one more interesting comment, that the author of the book that says Otzar Israel, that you have to cover your head, he says, "Aminag kadum lishlof aminal lichvot sarim umelachim." The ancient practice was to take off your shoes when you enter an important place. Until, he says, עד שבא האפיפיור, ואמר שיותר טוב להראות כבוד והכנעה בגילוי ראש. Until the Pope established the practice of showing respect with removing your head cover. ונתקבלו דבריו בכל ארצות אירופה ולא בארצות המזרח. And people followed the ruling of the Pope in European countries, but not in the Middle East or North Africa. And he says, "ולפי זה יש איסור בגילוי הראש משום ובחוקותיהם לא תלכו." He says that since the Christians do it in a holy place, removing their head, we cannot do it because it's imitating their laws. So Rabbi Meshash answers to that. He says, first of all, כל דבר שהוא משום כבוד אין בו משום ובחוקותיהם. That's an important concept, because a lot of people, in many cases, attack certain practices saying this is not a Jewish custom. And the answer to that should be, what is the root of the custom? Is it a logical thing or a pagan thing? So, for example, some people used to put flowers on the grave. And there were others who said, oh, this is not our custom, this is a non-Jewish custom. The question is there something logical here? And respect, of course. People want to show respect, and they love, and they're longing for the person who passed away. Same thing of wearing black clothes during mourning. Some people said it's the practice of the non-Jews. Other people answered, other rabbis like Rabbi Meshash, since black clothes show they have a certain air of grievance and of grief and sadness, it's a logical thing. Same thing here, says it makes sense for people to feel that since the hat is sometimes a status symbol, to take it off shows that you show respect. That's one. The other thing, and here shows like his historical knowledge, he says, "Toladad האפיפיורי מתחיל לאחר המאה השישית למספר הנוצרים." But how can you say that we started covering our head because of the popes, where the first time it's mentioned in the Talmud is in the 4th century, and the papacy, or the establishment of the Pope, was not created until the 6th century. So it doesn't fit in terms of time. So, conclusion of his whole discussion, which we mentioned already yesterday, he says there's no prohibition at all to go with one's head uncovered, meaning there's no obligation for a Jewish man to wear a kippah or to cover their heads. And one is not defined as religious or non-religious because of that. He says, but עם כל זה אני אומר, שמאחר שאין שום הכר במלבושים בין דתי ללא דתי, that other than the kippah, there's no distinction between one who is religious, one who is observant, and one is not. It is recommended or appropriate for people to have the kippah as a symbol, as a religious symbol. But again, he sees it's a symbol, and it's not an obligation, and one should take it with that sense. And the most important thing, he says at the end, the most important thing is we are united. We respect each other with different practices and different customs. So we'll stop here.